Okay. This morning, I would like to share a short extract from Master Jieh's speech. A single kind thought will bring about blessings. A heart of love and kindness is inherent in everyone. It is not just the rich people who can donate money. Even the poor who receive aid can empathize with the plight of those in suffering and wish to contribute even the smallest amount to the earthquake victims in Turkey and Syria to help them rebuild their homes as soon as possible. A single thought will bring about blessings. As their donations grow bit by bit, so do their blessings. Yeah, we do good and create blessings and good affinities for ourselves and others. Grateful to Master's teaching. Now let us send our sincere prayers into the 10 directions. May the Sahara land be free from disaster and peace prevails in the world. Let us sing the prayer song with sincere piousness.
In my heart, I pray, may we join now and now and all in thy down and the
May all minds be purified. May there be peace in the community. May there be no disasters in this world. Now let us pray together for universal love and blessing. With loving respect, gratitude, and confidence, let us wish every person in our lives a healthy body, an enlightened mind, and a total fulfillment in universal love. Now, let us expand this consciousness to include every person in the world, every being in the universe. Let our unified love make this wonderful world even better. Let us all immerse our lives in the joyful embrace of universal love. Before we hear the wonderful sharing, let us invite our masters to lead us in paying homage to Triple Gems. Let us pay our respects for these teachings and explanations to the Buddha and Master Jieh by making 3 sincere bows. Please rise, palms together. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. And a bow to our beloved Abode Masters who could join us today. Today we have two great speakers, Brother Victor and Sister Janet, who will be sharing on diversity and equity inclusion. And next we'll have Sister Margo Prebenda, who will be sharing on the environment impact of our food choices. Before we listen to the sharing, we will share the weekly summary. Sister Su Ching not able to join us today, but she has prepared the slides of the weekly summary. I will share it today. Yeah, it's weekly summary of last week's Saturday Dharma. Okay, Sister YY, Sutra Adaptation 1 to Infinity. In Lotus adaptation on a global event, Sis YY took part when 5 nations with Taiwan together with one heart. Prayers for world peace through sign language and dance. Sister YY is reminded of the 6 conditions to alight for a smooth chant. Time, host, place, faith, assembly, and hearing too. We must converge for causes and conditions to ensue. Sister YY relate for us to be grateful always for all and every. This 金丝 aphorism should be a constant for us daily. Yeah. The Sutra adaptation with spirit so high, the Lotus Sutra's essence we can't deny. The Sutra of infinite meanings as our foundation brought many brothers and sisters in holy congregation. Chapter 1 on virtue to teach, patience and letting go within our reach. Chapter 2 on Dharma we expound. Chapter 3 on 10 merits to surround. Wonderful memories we hold so dear. May all beings be free from fear. Harmonious and safe society we desire. May this performance lift our spirits higher and higher. Then we have Sister Mei Yun. Sister Mei Yun, a teacher already renowned, is the founder of the online book study in the Kaohsiung town. 10 years it's been, and how it has grown. Translated into 10 languages, a feat to be shown. Volunteers from many countries were and are involved. Their hard work and dedication result in many challenges solved. Master says Sister Mei Yun understands Master and with her heart of gold. In the Sutra adaptation performance planning, albeit tedious, Sister Mei Yun really took hold. Some folks seem so good, especially who have done it before. At first, Sister Mei Yun thought she was too overwhelmed, but renewed in spirit, so she soared. She motivated and gave energy to all who scored, even to the elderly who stood for hours, her support they adored. When asked why she didn't rest, she replied, Master Jieh is also not resting, no time, no bite. For the 10th anniversary celebrations, help come from far and wide, slides and logos designed, participants contributed side by side. Sister Mary is grateful for the translation and voiceover smite, reaching all corners far and wide, day and night. The translation teams have much improved over time. It is a delight. To motivate, inspire, and encourage, Sister Mary is always inside. Seize the moment and just do it is her creed. Encouraging more people to take the lead. Sister Mary, a teacher of many talents, all have agreed. 10 years of online study, an amazing legacy indeed. Wow, thank you. Yeah, okay. Now I will hand over to Sister Su Ching, who will introduce our next speaker. Sister Su Ching. Oh, sorry, Sister Kaping.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Good morning from Melbourne. That's where I am at the moment. Yeah, I'm very, very honored today to be the MC to hold some, really amazing speakers. And for the first part of our talk today, we have Brother Victor and Sister Janet. Though both Brother Victor and Sister Janet are residing in the US, but they're still very actively supporting Taiwan and China Tzu Chi's missions on top of course, US. I learned that they have this ability to reach out to people of all ages and inspire them with their very eloquent sharing of life experiences. So, and to many, I think, we know that Brother Victor and Sister Janet are very active sharers on the Wednesday Kaohsiung online book study, as well as the Saturday Hualien English Heartwarming sharing platform. They are multilingual, and their sharing is often multifaceted and very, very relatable to today's lifestyle for all ages. So sharing with us today, it's a very, very interesting topic on diversity, equity, inclusion. So in short, DEI. So Brother Victor and Sister Janet, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sisters. Introduction. And so we're going to start now. Dear beloved Master Zhen Yan, Abode Master, Global Tzu Chi families, and online listener, good morning. Have a wonderful day, everyone. This is Victor Jieh. My Dharma name is Jieh.
This is Janet Yao, and my Dharma name is Tzu Ya. Today, we will share a topic that we have enjoyed and found very interesting. It is called DEI.
So it is an acronym for the diversity, equity, and the inclusion.
DEI research. Recent research is about why DEI comes into play in the Fortune 500 company in the world.
An organization with DEI spirit will attract talent, and employees will stay longer term with the organization.
In Tzu Chi, with the master teaching about the four spirit soup: satisfaction, gratitude, understanding, and inclusion.
When the volunteers join Tzu Chi, when they greeting each other, only use elder brother or sister, no younger brother or sister, showing we have no age discrimination in the group. We discover that most volunteer with Tzu Chi for their whole life and are willing to join Tzu Chi for the next life. Why did Tzu Chi do it from the beginning? How does Tzu Chi sustain it? The DEI is not just a token, it's a spirit.
Okay, this is the DEI report from one of the Fortune 500 company. As you can see, it is an inclusion and a diversity report.
Please note that the report showed the company's employee, the gender distribution, and the U.S. race and ethnicity percentage for different races.
And this is a diversity annual report from another Fortune 500 company.
They talk about from awareness to action. That means it's a new concept in recent year for the company. They aware of the importance of the DEI and start to take action.
Okay, and this is
this company only started the DEI program in 2005, so it's not long ago, although it's also several years from now.
This company shows the diversity and inclusion report.
Focusing on women and the Black.
Okay, and this report shows the
Here, Hispanic and the diverse and the inclusive.
Okay, and this is from the Microsoft CDO, Chief Diversity Officer, talk about the company vision,
which emphasized that inclusion has significant impact on behavior, and they take it very seriously. So that means the top, usually we hear the CEO, CFO. Right now they have, in the Microsoft, they have CDO. So it's from very top level, they want to make sure the DEI is implemented, the spirit in throughout the company, because this talks about the pay equity for racial and ethnic minority in the U.S.
And show the woman and the woman in the U.S. of the company. Why do we see this report?
It is because DEI is a universal value nowadays, and it is the KPI for Fortune 500 companies. So it's a very serious matter for those big companies.
Let's see the diversity of the religion and how to implement it.
So the various religions expect peace, inclusion, and respect for each other. They treat other religion with diversity in mind, more inclusion and stability, because right now we want to take the religion as an example for diversity. I'm going to show with the examples how Tzu Chi does it, because those DEI is not just a token, it's a spirit, and you have to implement it in the organization. It's a group effort. I just want to show everybody how Tzu Chi does it from the beginning of the organization.
Okay, this story, let's see the example from the Tzu Chi Indonesia.
So volunteer in Indonesia, they're doing a free clinic at a school with over 10,000 students. I think somebody already familiar with that story, but I just use that as an example to show the diversity of religion. We go over there every week. The volunteer from Indonesia and have helped many students to cure their diseases.
Okay, and we also support them with the rice, and later on we provide the rice field.
And we taught the student to plant rice so they could self-reliance, because like Master teaching is, we want to turn their life around from their hands up and goes hands down. Okay, and
elder hobbies appreciate Tzu Chi.
Because Elder Hobby, he learned all the things the Tzu Chi volunteer from Indonesia did with his school, and he learned it's all the master teachings. He respect Master Zhen Yin very much. His coming is he understands Master Cheng Yen's heart is very pure, and he wishes to put Master's picture in every classroom in his school.
And the school is pleased to start putting the master picture in the classroom.
As you can see on the picture, every student has a Master Cheng Yen's picture in their hand. They are ready to put it in the classroom with a big smile.
Mhm. See, you can see the master picture is in every classroom.
And the Elder Harvey's picture is also in the school. So usually just one picture. Right now, Master Cheng Yen's picture is also in every classroom, so every student can see Master Cheng Yen's picture along with the Elder Harvey's picture.
Mhm. And at Eman School, Elder Harvey Sakrafi speak his wish.
So this is young Elder Harvey, and he very touched by what we did in the school. So he talks about his wish. He wishes a different ethnic and religion in Indonesia can work together, and he saw that. He's very touched.
Okay, two religions work together with the passion.
So you can see Elder Harvey hugs Tzu Chi volunteer Yuan. And so that's a very good example for the interface of a religion. It's respect each other. It's a diversity of religion. That's another example. An earthquake occurred at 2016, April 16 in the Ecuador at a city called, in that region, and at one of the cities called Noah. It's at the earthquake was at the 7.8 Richter scale.
Okay, and also Tzu Chi helped rebuild the church and the church park.
So that part include a brand new church and a dormitory for the sister and some offices.
Church with the modern, so you can see the church with the modern light equipment.
And it's a very classic design, like Master Cheng Yen taught us. If we give somebody something, it must be the best.
Yes.
So Sister Mercedes from Secular Franciscan Order, she talked about the interface because she saw this. Tzu Chi is a Buddhism and they are Catholic. And we go there, spend time with them, help them to resolve their problem. Because every time there's some disaster happen, Master Cheng Yen will ask a volunteer to check with the local religion, like a Catholic sister, what they need. The sister told the volunteer said, the spirit center of the Kanoa, the church is destroyed by the earthquake. Can we help them to rebuild it? And Master Cheng Yen promised it, so we did that. And the Sister Mercedes from Secular Franciscan Order appreciate the great love from Tzu Chi.
And she will spread the great love too.
And we can see Brother Jieh, he's a project leader for the Ecuador for that church park rebuild project. So when it's done, so he of course he already went there many times. So he's very happily to attend the opening ceremony happily. Yeah, and they took the group picture of Tzu Chi volunteers, sister, and the construction team on 2019, July 13. It's the opening for the new church park.
Okay, the following you can see the brother Hu Guangzhong lead the Turkey educational project for the Syrian refugees.
So as you can see, Brother Guangzhong and his sister Zhou Ruyi, they with another volunteer, they went there and they helped the refugees children to go back to school. I think many of you already understand this great story. And also they built the international school at Istanbul at the at Turkey that's called Al-Manahai Syrian School. So that school turned the student life around. Many students actually benefit from this. Some of the students from Manahai are ready to go to medical school at the university already. So it's they cultivate there to help all the Syrian refugee children to go to school. The school also provide a free clinic.
Some of students, this
Yeah.
is, okay.
The next one. Yeah, the provide this clinic for the student and family. That means the school help, it's a community, help those Syrian refugee family also, because some of the refugees, they used to be doctors, so they're willing to help their own people from their own country.
Okay, in the foreign video, we can see the future new school at the site visit.
Because we only cover a small portion of the Syrian refugee student, and there are millions of Syrian refugees in Istanbul right now. So the plan is to build a bigger school, to help more children like those children already in the school. So we select a bigger site, try to build a brand new big school. So we'll cover more refugee children to join the school, to get the right education, to have a bright future. So these students, they are already in school, but they also have a heart, loving heart for their other children from their same country. They wish other Syrian refugee children can also share this kind of charity from Tzu Chi. And we developed that. They know that they want to join the school, but the school, you can see the site is already full with so many children already. But we want to build a bigger school, needs support from all the Tzu Chi people or members, or to raise funds to support the school. I think Brother Hu Guangzong is major. Besides his other major mission, this is one of the major mission he focused on. He also sell the books and try to raise funds for the school right now.
The student.
So
student with the news.
So that's a picture for all the students. They visit the new school site.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the 500 years old Korean manuscript donated to the Tzu Chi to keep the this brother Hu Guangzong.
Yeah, because that shows the interface is really going deep in the people's heart. Because we know Brother Hu Guangzong, he's brought up from a Muslim family, but he wants to do Tzu Chi. And Tzu Chi really respect the religion from deep from our heart, is real. So when implemented, people can really touch by this respect. Although all these people from Israel, from the Syrian, their religion is Muslim, and we are Buddhism, but we help them very sincerely. We really respect them and respect their religion. So it's a proof. We need to implement it. It's not just a token, say, oh, we have a religion diversity. So Tzu Chi, Master, lead us to implement the Dharma deep from our heart. very sincere respect for different religion. And they can feel it. They can really feel it. So they pay back with respect to us. So we really want to learn the spirit of master teaching. All these examples just remind us, give us an example. So when we do the interface, we must do it very, very sincerely, because they can feel it. They can feel your sincerity. You really respect the interface. The diversity is deep in our heart. Every member in Tzu Chi have the same heart. So that's an example of the interface of the, for the Syrian refugee children. We can do another example, like Tzu Chi built churches as a Sanlin River Village in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. That's an earlier disaster, a natural disaster caused some refugee from the mountainside. They moved down. Tzu Chi built a village over there, but all the villagers, they believe in their faith is Christian, and they have, even in Christian, they have two different type of beliefs, so they cannot share a church. So we built two churches for different type of Christian belief group. They live there, they got their own church. So really we respect their beliefs.
Okay, the following next example is 2013 College Mary Ann and Christ. There's the King's Secretary School was built by the Tzu Chi at the port of the Princess Heidi.
Because why we do that? Because there was people still remember in 2010 there was a very severe earthquake in Haiti. We went there to help them. It's the same thing. Master Cheng Yen said, you ask the sister there, do they need any help? And the sister there say, we have a school there, but because of the earthquake, the school is totally destroyed. Can you help us? So Master Cheng Yen said, yes, we're going to help you to rebuild your school. So, and how do we find that? We know the school already, but in 2017, we did the food distribution in Haiti. And after we finished the distribution of the food, we as a group to visit the school. So we got a chance to see the school by ourselves. And the students were thrilled to see us, because they recognize our uniform. They don't know us, but they recognize our uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We visit the monument,
yeah.
in the front of the school. They have a lot of story put on the dam.
Yeah, so and also we go to check the campus. I found the classroom window is evident and shining. So it's so
very clean.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see the beautiful school under the blue sky of the Caribbean. It's very nice weather and a very nice place.
Yeah, this school is well constructed using the SRC structure. In last few years, there's another serious earthquake happened in Haiti. I believe this school with the SRC structure will sustain the earthquake. Well, they don't need to rebuild again.
And we are also invited to attend the mass ceremony at the school at that time.
So we went there, visit the school. They treat us as one of their family.
Yeah.
So the father sees us. He's very happy to see us with a unit, with the Tzu Chi uniform. He, of course, he recognized our uniform, means he recognized Tzu Chi from their heart.
Now let us tour of this campus. It is on the hill beside of the port of the Princess. Okay, see.
As you can see, this is a big campus.
Mhm.
It's on the top of the hill. You can oversee the whole city of the Port of Prince. It is well constructed school with the SRC structure. You know, it's very stable, well established school site.
Mhm.
So the sister, when they receive the school, they are very excited.
Okay, and
Let's switch here to another interface. It's what we say is a universal value, like Pope Francis. He held Giovanni Santo to prisoners of different religions, because we know, if we know the Catholic or the Christian, that's the tradition ceremony. But Pope Francis, he did it for those held prisoner. They are from different race and a different religion. Before it's not like that, because Pope Francis, everybody respect him in the world. He always lead the thought of all the Christian world. We must have an interface, respect. This is a diversity world, so we should do that. So let's get some feeling of the interface. So that's Master Zhen Yan give us some thought on that interface, like hundreds of rivers return to the sea. So Master teaching is religions nowadays should promote human well-being based on ethical needs. So Tzu Chi is a humanitarian help without doing missionary work, emphasize the respect for the local religion and the culture. So Tzu Chi's interface cooperation experience uses a metaphor of 100 rivers returning to the sea, so which includes the people's hearts and practicing great love, potential, and action. So open-mindedly about including other religions and the utmost care of religion to the global suffering.
okay, so for next we are talking about equality versus the equity. The left picture is that people use the equality to treat the people who need help. Using the equity will help the people who need help. Very interesting. You can explain that.
Yeah, so one picture tells 1,000 words. So you can see people think, oh, we should treat them equally. That's a general mind, but from Master teaching said we should treat them with equality. So what's equality? If you see the right picture, you compare the two pictures, you can see we want to give them like in other sayings, you give them the shoes they can fit on their feet. Okay, that's another saying about how to describe this.
Okay, so Master teaching volunteer the foreign. Master taught us that we needed to measure the size of the cross of the recipient before we bring the cross to them.
So let me share a equity example from the Santa Rosa in California, because we joined the Santa Rosa wildfire disaster relief. And after that disaster, we also joined the team to help those survivors from the wildfire. And one time I remember Sister Ai Zhu, she was the leader for the Santa Rosa area. And at that, we joined him with her to visit the survivor. And one of the survivors is an old lady, and she lost her house, so she lived with her children. And her children called Sister Ai Zhu, said, my mother left the home without any clothes except the clothes she's wearing. Right now, she needs some clothes to change. And can you bring some secondhand clothes, bring so she can feel ease, because she's kind of like in a very bad mood right now. She feel everything's not smooth in her life again. So we just follow master teaching. We should not give their second hand. We go to the J.C. Penney. Everybody knows that.
Yes,
Very good department store. First, Sister Aizu follows master teachings. Call the children, say, what's the height and the weight of your mother? What's your mother's shoe size? So we check all the details. So as a group, we've totally 5 volunteers. We went to J.C. Penney, start
try to
find the right size, and looks very fashion, not really fashion, very beautiful clothes. Like I remember Sister Janet picked the shoes. We find the right size of the shoes, but also the style maybe it's good for the old lady to wear. So we have things prepared. We bring those new clothes and shoes to visit them and show them. Their whole families in the living room. They welcome us. We talk about it happily, and Sister Janet suggests that, why don't you wear it? Let's see it fits. So the old lady is very happy going and change it. When she comes out, the whole family, I mean the children say, wow.
They're very surprised.
Everything fit. The length of the sleeves and the trouser and the shoes, everything fit. And the old lady suddenly the face brighten up, and her children say, see, so she's enlightened by your Tzu Chi volunteer. They are so happy. So that's the difference of equality and equity. So that's something we learned.
Okay, now let us talking about inclusion.
Yeah, inclusion. So inclusion, we also give some example. So like it's a very general scene, like an employee very happily report to his new job. When he joined the company, people, doesn't matter how big the company is, people in the work group. So the new employee joined a new group from, he's very welcome by the group member, and everybody appreciate his or her talent, and wish the new employee can use his talent to work in the group. So this new employee feel like home. It's not in the workplace. It feel like home. And the new employee also look at the management, one level up of the work group, and the new employee feel the same spirit. So the new employee say, I changed several jobs, but this job I will stay long term. I don't want to change job. This is just like home. The first day the new employee join work, he can feel it. So that's the implementation of inclusion. Okay, that's just an example. It's not that simple, right? And like I mentioned, in Tzu Chi volunteer, different ages join Tzu Chi, and they all said, oh, you're elder brother, elder sister.
No.
Yeah. So they don't think your age. Say, oh, because I think you're older than me, I should call you this. If you're younger than me, no age discrimination. So that simple thing, that's Dharma from Master Zhen Yan. She wants this happen. So we did that. So everybody joined the group very naturally. They feel at home. Sometimes even at home, people say, oh, you're old. Why do you act so slow? Nothing happened in Tzu Chi because everybody respect, no age discrimination. Like I said, because inclusion, so people come to Tzu Chi, they work for a long time, maybe their whole life, and they wish next life they still want to rejoin Tzu Chi. So see, that's the powerful impact of of inclusion. So in many departments, so we talk about the spirit, how to, inherit. So like Tzu Chi, we have this the inclusion, like in for spirit soup, we already have that for many years. But we did that, have we really maintained that in the organization? Because the personal memory is personal. The group memory needs to everybody effort to keep it, to inherit. So that's why Master Zhen Yan want to keep the Tripitaka. So that's a record of what they did, what we did. So a lot of things, because Master Zhen Yan's Dharma said, we want to keep the good thing in our group. We have a group memory, not just one person, but we'll keep the group memory. We'll continue inherit it for this good memory, good spirit. So that's also very important.
Okay. Now we're talking about DEI, right? So DEI is one of the KPIs for the Fortune 500 company.
Yes. So as a successful company, right now they will see their DEI report. There are a lot of discussion in the management level or management. There are a lot of leadership management. They will talk about DEI once. One of the key performance indicator, and also the top board member, they are measured by the KPI. DEI is one of the key performance indicator. So that means the whole society knows the advantage for group organization. They have DEI. That's the competitive and advantage. Every company wants to do that right now.
Okay. Now it's time for conclusion. Okay.
So that one has listened to the scarcely heard Dharma teaching. That's what we learn all the time.
Yeah.
And the bright master is met, although hard to meet. We met Master Zhen Yan. She lead us all the way along. So we're so fortunate. We're blessed people, right? Master already has the insight when the foundation was established. The four spirit soup has been in Tzu Chi, I don't know which year, but for a long, long time. So we don't need the KPI from the Fortune 500 in recent year, like the one in 2005. They start aware, then start take action. Tzu Chi already founded in 1966. We have this tradition for a long time. That means we have a bright master lead us with the right concept. So master education include the four spiritual satisfaction, gratitude, understanding, inclusion. It's not a token, it's a spirit. As you can see the diversity of the religion, I just use that, show all the example from beginning till recent. We did that. That's the spirit of Tzu Chi. So we have that. So we should, as a volunteer, we should aware the spirit, and we should keep it, not for the KPI of DEI in the organization. We already have that. So we should cherish that. So that means over 56 years now, those spirits have been deep-rooted in the heart of the volunteers. And in the practical program of Tzu Chi, we have implemented, we have so many good examples. And because DEI is a big project for the organization, so I just briefly
prefer to share the idea that very quickly in the very short periods.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully that will kind of review or remind some people or those things they already know. If people don't aware that, just a heads up to remind people. It's very, very important. We should the four spirit soup is very important, because Master Zhen Yan told us we want to use the Dharma in our daily life. And in Tzu Chi, we not only want to understand the sutra, the Dharma, we should implement it and implement to the spirit. Okay, so we must we must have the compassion, mercy, but we also want to have the wisdom. Both feet go along the way on the Buddhist path. So I think all these comes together as a Tzu Chi. Everybody is so blessed, and we're the blessed group. So really thanks for listening.
Very thank you.
Cảm
And,
ơn.
感ơn, Brother Victor and Sister Janet, for the very, very insightful sharing on today's topic, which is great. I mean, you know, corporates are going from not just ESG, environmental social governance, but also now talking about diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And you brought up, you know, some really, really key points. I mean, like Fortune 500 companies are now, I would say, forced, you know, to implement diversity, equity, and inclusivity in their companies. But unfortunately, just like ESG, many people or corporates are just ticking the boxes. So, you know, while the companies, you know, show percentages, the measurement year after year, but really how many of them individually are practicing DEI in their daily lives? And this is where Tzu Chi, with Master Wisdom guiding all of us, it's making a big difference by teaching children DEI from a very, very young age. And we have seen the impact of this, you know, from the many schools that we have built and the relationships, the affinities that we have had with people of different faiths. And we see the effect of that, how children can transform their anger, their worries into great love. And they are accepting different religion. They're able to work together. And this is how what, you know, DEI in reality should mean. And I think you brought out, you know, these key points that it should be taught from a young age to become a habit embedded into their character eventually. And that is where, you know, society will truly be at peace, at ease, and, you know, with harmony. And yeah, and this one other key point I noted is, you know, equality versus equity. It is so true. You know, life is never equal because life follows causes, condition, effect, and retribution. But equity encompasses the spirit of humanity and humility driven by the heart of gratitude and respect. So this is really, you know, something that is so key that we should all remember. So with that, thank you so much, Brother Victor and Sister Janet, for the very, very insightful sharing. Cảm ơn. Cảm ơn. I hope you will stay for the next session as well, because we have a very, very interesting speaker today, and that is Miss Margo Prebenda. Margo, are you there? Can you switch on your video so that everyone can see you? Hi, Margo.
Hi.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm calling you from Melbourne, so it's you know, it's almost 11 o'clock here, 10:16. I am really honored to have the opportunity to introduce Margo. Margo is the Regional Research and Investigations Coordinator for Greenpeace Southeast Asia. Margo is based in Kuala Lumpur, where she supports knowledge gathering and strategic research to back Greenpeace environmental campaigns. Before joining Greenpeace, Margo worked for UNICEF as corporate research and due diligence officer in Geneva, Switzerland. And prior to that, she worked in operation and compliance in the finance industry in New York. Margo has an MBA specializing in international organization management from the University of Geneva and a BA in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania. So it's very interesting to note that Margo has gone from corporate governance to now environmental protection. So when I read her background, and I thought it's really interesting to know what actually led Margo to shift from the corporate world to now an NGO world. And she told me this, and which I really want to share with everybody because I found it really inspiring. And Margo said that having started her career in the finance industry, she became increasingly concerned with the ethics and damage caused by the financial institutions. And I was in the financial institution for almost 40 years, so I should be very ashamed of that. And even later on in UN, she felt that politicians were talking but not acting. And worse still, money is the primary factor leading to decisions that threaten to destroy our future. What appealed to her about Greenpeace was the emphasis on action, in addition to the fact that Greenpeace is entirely independent, not funded by any governments or corporates. Therefore, they can speak out on any issues and against any stakeholders causing environmental damage. I think this is one key point that not many people know about. And Margo's passion to protect the environment has not only shaped her career path, it also has embodied her personal life. She strives to live with zero waste. I don't know how you're going to do that, but that is really, admirable. She produces only a very, very small amount of trash that she measures each month. This is something that we must all emulate. She has been a vegan for nearly 5 years now, and she is a huge advocate for composting as well as growing her own food. She experimented with her urban garden, and she has recently set up a community compost next to her apartment building, which all residents can contribute to, as well as use the compost for their own plants. These practices are not only good for the environment, Margo said it has also significantly improved her health, her energy, and well-being, and makes her feel much more connected with nature and the most important things in life. So this is truly an example of one person who walked the talk, and if you don't do it, you wouldn't feel it. So we are very, very delighted today to have Margo with us to share on one very, very key, important topic that touches all of our lives, and that is the environmental impact of our food choices. Well, we can all gain a better insight from what Margo is doing, practicing in her life, not only just talking, but really walking the talk, and that each of us really, whatever that we can do, matters for our long-term survival. All right, so over to you, Margo. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just share my screen now. All right, I hope this is visible, and I will jump right in. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Like Kapang mentioned, I work for Greenpeace. Right now, I'm working for Greenpeace Southeast Asia as a regional research and investigations coordinator. And I wanted to talk today focusing on, like Kapang mentioned already, the environmental impacts of our food choices. So I'll go through a few topics that I think are closely related to this. The first one is industrial animal agriculture. The second is palm oil deforestation. The third is industrial fishing. And the fourth is the plastic pandemic, and also how that links to our food, because it's become part of our food chain, whether or not we like it. And in order to try not to leave everyone a bit discouraged, I want to try to close off with some solutions and ideas about what we are promoting at Greenpeace and things that we can all do and that we can do as society and as that companies can do as well. So I'll jump right into the first topic on industrial animal agriculture. You may or may not know, but there's many reasons why animal agriculture is destroying the environment, and it's something that has to change if we ever want to meet our emissions reduction goals. The first reason I have here is that it is responsible for critical forest destruction. Some of the most important forest areas in the world are being destroyed primarily for animal agriculture. Approximately 80 to 90% of the Amazon is destroyed for animal agriculture, and it's primarily in the form of soy used for feedstock. It's soy that's not really being used for humans, it's being used as feedstock for animals, and as well as cattle farming. The second reason why animal agriculture is really bad for the environment is the emissions. And it's not just the emissions from methane that is produced by raising cattle, which you may have heard about, but it's also the emissions from transport, land use change, and use of fresh water. And this is linked to the forest destruction because, of course, forests absorb carbon. So the fact that forests are destroyed to raise animals is not only reducing or emitting carbon, but it's actually reducing our ability to absorb carbon as well. And the third reason I have here is pollution. And actually, cattle farming is the most significant contributor to nitrogen and phosphorus pollution in waterways. So you may not know this, but raising mass farming of animals causes a lot of pollution that is not being currently managed. And another thing that I think is really important here is to look at the size of the problem. So this chart, I think, is really helpful to visualize how inefficient our agricultural system is. You can see the top row is showing the total land on the Earth. Of the total land on the Earth's surface, about 71% is habitable land. That's the orange rectangle in the second line. And then of habitable land, 50% of that is being used for agriculture. And if you go down to the fourth line, of all of the land used for agriculture, 77% is used for meat and dairy livestock, which is a huge amount. Obviously, you can see that the vast majority is being used for animal agriculture, not plant-based agriculture. And this percentage is also including the feed production for animals. So it's the whole chain. So it's also, they're growing soy for feedstock for animals. But the shocking thing is that of that 77%, it's only providing 18% of the world's calories, which you can see is massively inefficient. And it reveals that if we were eating plant-based diets, not only would we require significantly less space, but we could feed many, many more people. We could regrow our forests, we could protect biodiverse areas. So there is a very clear solution here with this broken food system, and we need to be moving towards it. So that's why animal agriculture is so problematic, and it's a bigger problem than I think people realize. They may think, oh, it's just it's not great for the environment, but no agriculture is great for the environment. But actually, there's a huge difference between animal agriculture and plant-based agriculture. So you may have also seen something like this. There are a lot of studies showing that have estimated the carbon footprint of different types of foods. And you can see in this chart that 7 out of 10 of the most emissions intensive foods are animal-based, and beef is by far the worst food in terms of carbon emissions. It emissions from beef are more than double the emissions from any other food product. And beef is also linked to dairy because cows are also used for dairy and then sometimes slaughtered for beef. So the industry, the meat and the beef and dairy industry is very problematic. And now I just want to touch a little bit on some statistics for Malaysia to highlight a bit, because I'm based here, and I found this really interesting, actually, that Malaysians are eating a lot of poultry, so chicken and duck and poultry animals. And I was quite surprised to see that it's not only the most common type of meat in Malaysia, but it's significantly higher than the global average. So in 2015, the global per capita consumption of poultry meat in Malaysia was, the global was 13.8, but in Malaysia it was 49. So that's almost 4 times the global average, which was quite surprising. And another thing that I just wanted to highlight that's specific to Malaysia here, but also is something that's very common in other countries, is that meat is imported, and often meat, dairy, and feedstock is imported. So I found that Malaysia is importing about 80% of its beef from other countries. Almost all dairy products are imported, and Malaysia is in the top poultry importers in the world as well. And of the animals that are raised in Malaysia, about 85% of all animal feed is imported. So even if I think this one is interesting, because a lot of people think, oh, maybe eating local is better than eating plant-based. But I think there is a very big difference in the impact here, because even if you're eating local meat, most likely the feedstock for that meat was imported, and you have to remember that it's imported for an animal's entire life. So it's much higher emissions than even importing any other product, any plant-based product. So the emissions from the transportation are actually relatively small in the overall emissions from animal agriculture. And some of the other reasons why this is bad are the fact that it's a food security problem. A lot of countries are really dependent on importing food from other countries, and that also makes them vulnerable when there's a global food crisis or food shock, including price increases. And we've seen this with the war in Ukraine. It has caused a shockwave of inflation on food prices. And when a country is reliant on imports, that's really dangerous and bad for people that struggle to put food on their plate. And it's also, of course, bad to be importing anything because there's emissions from travel. But like I said, those emissions are relatively small from the other emissions that come from raising animals. And one other thing that I think is really important to look at, especially in the current moment about animal agriculture, is the link to infectious disease spread. So there's a number of reasons why infectious diseases spread. But one of them that people may not really think about is the fact that animal agriculture also contributes to that and significantly increases the risk of further disease spreads and things like pandemics. So it was found in a recent study from 2020 that nearly 3/4 of the world's largest meat, fish, and dairy companies were graded as high pandemic risk and criticized for their inability to prevent the emergence of new zoonotic diseases. And this considered a lot of factors. There's a lot of reasons why animal agriculture is contributing to that. It's not just the fact that it's destroying forests and ecosystems, but it's also the living and working conditions in animal farms, which you've probably seen photos. The animals are usually contained in very small spaces. Disease spreads very quickly, and it's the kind of environment that's a lot of antibiotics are used. which leads to antibiotic resistance. And there's just many problems that make animal farming not only vulnerable to pandemics and diseases, but also a potential cause for spreading them around the world. And there's also been clear links between biodiversity loss and the spread of zoonotic diseases. So it's been shown through a number of studies that biodiversity is actually protecting us from disease transmission. For example, by diluting large single species populations, which prevents transmission from mosquitoes. But there's many other ways and other examples of infectious diseases that have increased when biodiversity and forests are destroyed. So by encroaching more on the natural environment, we are reducing our protection against zoonotic diseases. And in addition to that, there's other reasons why we are putting ourselves more at risk, because when we're destroying the environment, we're also getting more in touch with we're getting closer to wild animals, which could enable direct human encroachment or direct human contact with diseases and infections. And of course, the resource exploitation is also causing this problem. And like I mentioned, agribusiness and industrial agriculture. Okay, so that I think kind of gives a summary of the first topic, which was focused on animal agriculture. And now I want to touch a little bit on deforestation from palm oil, because especially in this region in Southeast Asia, this is something that is very sensitive and very difficult, and a lot of people don't quite understand what's happening and what can we do, and is sustainable palm oil even possible? So I'm going to touch a little bit on this now. You may have heard before that palm oil is everywhere, and especially here we see it a lot, but globally palm oil is in about 50% of all products you can find in the supermarkets. And interestingly, Indonesia and Malaysia make up over 85% of the global supply chain for palm oil, meaning this is a really critical region for many, many products all around the world. At the same time, this is the biggest driver of deforestation in some of the most biodiverse forests and critical peatlands that exist in Southeast Asia. And it's also, of course, when peatlands are burned for palm oil plantations, it's very, very dangerous for threatening and critically endangering species. And just maybe I think probably most people know, but this burning of the land to create palm oil plantations is very standard practice, also because it's the quickest way to destroy and clear forest land to grow palm oil. And it's also a practice that's used, it's called slash and burn farming. And it's also a practice used to try to regenerate the soil to grow new palm oil plantations. And this is why it's continuous, and we've seen this problem for years and years. And this image here kind of helps to show a bit about the emissions, the critical aspect of peatlands and how the emissions are coming from Southeast Asia. This came from a study which doesn't look at every country, but the ones that are colored are the countries that were examined here. So even though Malaysia is not on there, you can see that Indonesia is, and we know that Malaysia is also a critical source of palm oil. And the circles on this map represent the emissions coming from the degradation of peatland. So you can see that even though the land space in Indonesia looks actually a little bit small compared to the other land coverage of peatland, the emissions coming from the burning of peatlands in Indonesia is the biggest source of emissions destruction, emissions from peatland destruction in the world. And I'm not sure if everybody also knows why is this happening? Why is peatland so important? Actually, peatland is it's a term to describe the composition of the soil underneath in a forest, and it's typically like wetlands. And that soil absorbs carbon, significantly more carbon than regular soil. So it's really important because actually the land underneath a peat forest can store up to 10 times the carbon of the forest above it. So when that land is destroyed, it has a much bigger impact than destroying other types of forests, which is why it's so important, because these forests are carbon sinks for us. And they are regions that desperately need to be protected if we want to avoid climate catastrophe. And that's why I think palm oil is such an important product to be looking at, because it's destroying some of the most important forests in the world. So like I mentioned, even though the land area is small, peatlands only cover 3% of land area, but they contain 42% of global soil carbon. So it's a really big impact when those are destroyed. And in Malaysia and Indonesia, the annual emissions from draining peatlands is equivalent to about 40 or 70 coal-fired power plants. So it's really, you can imagine this, we talk a lot about how bad fossil fuels are, but destroying these forests can be as bad as the emissions from fossil fuel facilities. And I just wanted to show some examples of products that use palm oil, because we don't even always know, but it's very prevalent in products that we don't always think about. And one of the reasons, I mean, sometimes it's labeled in the ingredients as palm oil, but it's not always labeled that way. So one of the things that's really confusing is that there are so many alternate names for palm oil. You can see on the right side here, this is a list of alternative names that you might see in an ingredients list that are legally appropriate terms to mean palm oil in our ingredients list. So even when we are trying to, let's say, avoid using products that contain palm oil, it's really hard to identify which ones those are. And here I just wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of sustainable palm oil and what's really happening, because a lot of companies, big global companies, are using palm oil. All of these companies on the right listed, these brands are using palm oil in their products. And they have all committed to sourcing palm oil from no deforestation, no peat, and no exploitation. However, Greenpeace has been investigating for a long time, and the reality is that companies don't really know where their palm oil is coming from. They have not been able to assure at all that their palm oil is not coming from deforestation. And Wilmar is one of the world's largest palm oil traders. And even though they have committed to no deforestation, no peat, no exploitation, in 2018, Greenpeace found that Wilmar was still buying from 18 out of 25 groups that are deforesting for palm oil. So they're not even close to succeeding with this commitment that they claim. So we found that the certification for sustainable palm oil is really failing. And these companies absolutely need to be doing more to make sure they know their supply chains, and there needs to be more transparency and reduction of the sourcing from unsustainable or unknown palm oil sources that can't be traced. And you all might know, but I just wanted to highlight here the impact of this palm oil deforestation on our daily lives, because it's not just that it's bad for the environment in some parts of the world, but it's reaching other parts of the world that have nothing to do with it necessarily, or and disproportionately affecting certain regions. So we know that KL looks like this on a normal day, but in 2019, when the haze came to KL, this is what it looked like. And of course, you can imagine the air pollution levels were very unhealthy. And it was not only disruptive for normal activities and travel and schools, but extremely bad for everybody's health. So this is the kind of thing that at Greenpeace we are really trying to prevent from happening. And during the pandemic, there was not so much haze because, well, kind of disrupted operations in many industries, but also weather patterns contribute to this. So the forces from El Nino were affecting kind of wind flows and movement. And that also was part of the reason why haze didn't show up as prominently in KL. But we don't know what it's going to be like this year, but we expect that it's possible haze could come back and it could turn into an annual thing again if we aren't doing something about it. And I also just wanted to mention who is kind of behind this, because there's also usually a lot of discussion blaming certain countries maybe, or certain companies, but the reality is that not only is it's a global issue, because the companies that are causing it, especially the haze that comes to Malaysia, well, even though that the palm oil concessions burning may be happening primarily in Indonesia, it's also happening a little bit in Malaysia, but the companies that own those palm oil concessions belong to Indonesian, Malaysian, and Singaporean companies primarily. And on top of that, global financial institutions are investing in this industry. So it's not something that we can only blame on Indonesia, for sure. I mean, there is a lot of financing and funding and operations coming from other countries that are investing in this industry. And in 2021, the world's top 50 financial institutions actually increased their investments in deforestation-linked industries, such as palm oil and beef. So the investment in these companies, even though globally we're talking a lot about climate change and companies are trying to promote sustainable investments and sustainable policies, we're often talking about carbon emissions, which is really, really important, but we don't talk so much about deforestation industries, and the investments in these industries are still increasing, which is very worrisome. And there were 5 Malaysian financial institutions that accounted for 1/5 of all of the investments in palm oil in the region. So it's something that we can demand change from every country almost in the world, because it's a supply chain that's really global. All right, so next I'm going to just jump into industrial fishing. And this is another one where I think a lot of people don't know much about where their fish comes from. And it might be surprising to learn the standard practices that are used to supply us with commercial fish. So there's a number of reasons why industrial fishing is harming us. The first one is that it's endangering species, because there's a lot of overfishing happening and it's very hard to protect marine protected areas. So 1/3 of fish populations have actually collapsed since 1950. And many fishing methods are really not good at fishing for only one kind of fish. They result in what's called bycatch, which is when they use nets, for example, that catch all kinds of animals in the ocean, and then they will often throw away the bycatch, which are the ones that they weren't intending to catch. And those animals are often killed and then dumped back into the ocean, which is just really horrible, wasteful, and terrible for the environment. And so hundreds of thousands of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and sharks are killed each year, often in the form of bycatch, when different types of fish are intended to be caught. And this is not only bad for species, but it's destroying the entire ecosystems, because when you disrupt one population in the ocean, you can imagine, but it has a ripple effect. It affects the entire ecosystem in the ocean, and it's really creating imbalance in in our ocean ecosystem. And it's also destroying livelihoods and threatening food security, because hundreds of millions of people live in coastal communities that are reliant on fishing for survival, people that are more disconnected from industrial food systems. And those people are the ones that are suffering most from this, because they are unable to catch fish to survive anymore, because fish are being overfished by commercial fishing. And it's really causing a lot of harm to communities that are not responsible. And the last one on here is that it's really harmful to humans as well, human workers, because modern slavery is a rampant problem in the fishing industry. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But the overall message here is it's really critical that we protect the ocean, because it's also one of the most important stores of carbon for us. And of course, just life in general is dependent on having the ocean alive. So if we kill the ocean, we will not survive. And this is something that I think people always imagine is not as important as it really is. We might not realize the significance of the ocean and what's happening to it, because it's hard to see. Usually the damage is being done very far away out in the high seas, and we think the ocean is so big, but our impact on it is much bigger than we think. And like I mentioned, modern slavery is something that's very common in the fishing industry, and Greenpeace, we do a lot of work on this, because most fishers on industrial fishing boats come from Southeast Asia. And we have many stories, and we support communities that are suffering because workers are exploited and taken onto fishing boats. And not only are they being abused, but they are often used to and forced to use illegal fishing practices. So you can imagine that the companies that don't care about human rights definitely don't care about the environment either, and they are not complying with any types of agreements or regulations to protect the ocean. And this is something that is really shocked me, because I didn't realize how bad this industry was and how much of our fish is coming from potentially modern slavery. And one of the reasons why this is so big in the fishing industry is a logistical reason, and that's because you can imagine when a boat goes out to sea, the fishers can't get off. Often their documents are taken, many cases they're trafficked, and they are held on these ships for much longer than they agreed to. In many cases, they sign a contract that suggests they'll be out at sea for maybe 3 months. And in some cases, they are held out at sea for 2 years or longer, which they have no choice about. And they also don't have access to their basic needs, may not be met. They don't have access to medical care. And especially with boats that are using illegal practices, they may not even have licenses to be in the waters that they're fishing. And so when a worker gets sick, they're not allowed to go to shore. And sometimes they die out at sea because they can't get access to basic medical care. And this is something that is just really horrific. And we at Greenpeace are trying to expose this as part of our work, because we're not only, Greenpeace is often known as just environmental protection, but it's a whole cycle, because the environment can't be protected if we're not respecting human rights and we're not demanding justice in all areas of the work that we do. And I wanted to just highlight here some of the fishing practices that are really destructive, because this actually surprised me when I first started learning about this. It's not just, overfishing doesn't just come from, line fishing a lot. It's not what they're doing out there. They use methods that are really destructive, such as bottom trawling, which is when giant nets are pulled across the sea floor, and that destroys whatever is in its path. So you can imagine this would destroy any kind of coral reef, any kind of life on the sea bottom. And it's extremely damaging for the ecosystem. And there's other examples like long lining, which is when thousands of hooks are baited along miles-long fishing lines, just catching as many fish as possible. And then again, these methods also produce bycatch, like I mentioned, which are fish that weren't intended to be caught, but end up dumped and killed. And of course, there's problems with overfishing and fishing in protected areas and fishing endangered species. All right, so moving on to this kind of last section, I want to talk about plastics issues and also maybe go into some examples of why plastics are so bad and also how it links to our food, because it's something that is unfortunately become part of our food chain as well. So I'll start off by giving a few main reasons why plastics are so bad for us, which you might know some of these already, but you might not know exactly all of them, and some of it is really hidden by the industry. The first thing that I want to highlight is that plastic production is growing out of control. So this chart is showing the growth in global plastics production between 1950 and 2014. And it's exponentially growing. So it's really getting out of control. And it's something that is relatively new in the history of humanity. And we have never found a way to manage it. And it's having impacts on our health and the environment that have never been seen before in human history. And this is another reason why it's quite scary. The second reason the plastic is so bad is because 99%, over 99% of plastic is made from fossil fuels. So it's not just a pollution problem, but it's got its own carbon footprint, not only from the issue of waste management, but it's coming from oil. And if we keep using plastic at the current rate, by 2050, it's expected that plastic will be using 20% of our global oil consumption. It's also going to be using up a significant share of our carbon budget, which is the amount of carbon that we would have to limit ourselves to in order to stay within the global warming boundaries, the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming goal. And the third reason that plastics are so bad for us, and this links a lot to our food, is that microplastics are now in everything. You may have heard that microplastics are being found in water and food. It's now also been found in our air. We're breathing it. It's in our soil. It's in our blood. It's been identified in breast milk. It's been identified in human placenta. And so babies are actually being born with microplastics. And it's been found in very far to reach places such as the Arctic, showing that it's spread beyond our control. And this chart on the right shows some examples of the number of microplastics particles that have been found in certain consumables. It's not including all things, but just a select group of examples. You can see that bottled water has a very high number of microplastics compared to some other products. And that's not surprising, but a lot of people don't think about that when they are trying to reduce their use of bottled water. They think of it as a pollution problem, but it's also a health problem, because if you're drinking bottled water, you're drinking more plastic than if you drink tap water. It's also something that has been commonly found in foods, including seafood, because fish are ingesting plastics, microplastics, and we're still eating fish, and that's entering our bodies. And the reason why it's so scary that we're eating microplastics is because plastic contains really dangerous chemicals, hormone disrupting chemicals, and forever chemicals that are really hard to remove from our body. And these enter our body through inhaling, ingesting, and also through our skin. And there are a number of issues that have been studied that we think are resulting from plastics exposure. But I think the even scarier thing is that this is a relatively recent thing, that we are eating so much food out of plastic containers, for example. This is something that didn't happen before the 1970s. It wasn't as common because plastics weren't really invented before the 1950s. So it's only in recent generations that we even have plastics, that we're exposed to plastic in our entire lives. And we're only seeing right now that babies are being born with plastic, and we don't even know what the long-term impact of that is. And we won't know until our children grow up. And it's also very hard to link health issues with plastic consumption because it's not immediate. But we know that it's causing problems. And I think for me, one of the scariest things that I have read about plastic chemicals exposure is the impact on fertility. So there have been a number of studies showing that our fertility rates are declining because of our exposure to chemicals in plastics. And in fact, in the past couple decades, the median sperm count in men has decreased by half. And it's possible that by 2045, the median sperm count could be 0 due to our ongoing consumption of products with microplastics and plastic chemicals. So it's really scary because for me, I think this is actually not only a pollution crisis, but it's a threat to our existence as well. And it's something that is impacting people in ways that we don't hear about very commonly in the media. And the fifth reason why plastic is so bad for us is, of course, the ecosystem destruction side, which you may have heard about. This one I think is quite common. And it's been estimated that by 2050, we will have more plastic in the ocean than fish by weight. And animals are dying everywhere in the ocean from ingesting plastic. And one of the really sad things I see is that animals think it looks like food. One of the, for example, turtles, they eat jellyfish. And when they see a plastic bag, it looks like a jellyfish. And so there are stories of turtles dying because they've been ingesting too many plastic bags. And it's really tragic. The final reason that I want to highlight here is that plastic pollution is very closely linked to social injustice. So we always talk about throwing away our trash, but we don't often think about what away means. And the reality is that there is no away, because there is nowhere that is safely and sustainably managing our waste. So often, this is an issue that is unjust globally, because we see a global plastic waste trade where often plastic waste is being shipped around the world from the richer, more developed countries to the more vulnerable, less developed countries that have lower regulations. And that's why it's very easy to ship plastic waste there. And this is happening. Southeast Asia is a region that's receiving a lot of plastic waste from the world. And this is a huge injustice because Southeast Asia and countries don't have the capacity to manage all of this waste, but also because even within countries, there's an injustice because typically the excess waste is dumped in areas where people are most vulnerable. It's often the lower income communities with less access to any kind of legal protection or education even about what's happening and how their health is being impacted by the dumping of waste and burning of it. So now moving on to this last section, I just want to quickly touch on why plastic recycling isn't something that's working for us entirely. Of course, recycling is important and we don't want to stop doing it, but I think the idea of recycling plastic is an idea that has been sold to us without really explaining the challenges and the limitations to it. And this is also because I just want to point out that the plastics industry is ultimately owned by the oil and gas industry, because like I mentioned before, 99% of plastics come from fossil fuels. So petrochemical companies are typically owned by oil and gas companies, and it's the same companies that have been lying about climate change and fossil fuels for decades. So they've also been kind of fooling us by saying plastics are fine because we can recycle them. The first reason why this is not true is because plastic recycling has never shown to work. The most recent data on recycling plastics show that only 9% of plastics were ever recycled globally as of 2015. But instead of being recycled, you may wonder what happens to it. And like I mentioned before, it's often exported globally, dumped on countries with less regulations. It gets dumped into landfills or the environment, where it often enters the ocean and our water. It also gets burned, which burning plastic is highly, highly dangerous. And people don't always realize how bad it is, but it's actually worse than burning fossil fuels because it produces poisonous gases because there's added chemicals in plastics. It's not even just burning a fossil fuel, it's burning a fossil fuel with added chemicals. And it also produces toxic ash. So this is something that I think everybody needs to know about, because sometimes people think it's okay to burn plastic along with their leaves, but it's extremely dangerous for the soil and for the air that we are breathing. The other reason why recycling is not working is because the actual term recycling is misleading. I won't go into too much detail of this chart, but the general idea is that most plastics, even when they are so-called recycled, are actually being downcycled into less quality materials. Studies have shown that only around 2% of plastics have been effectively recycled in the same quality material. And this is also because plastic is not infinitely recyclable. Most plastics can only be recycled at most once or twice before they have to be downcycled into a lower quality product. So while other materials like metal, glass, and even paper can be recycled over and over again into 100% recycled into the same quality material, this is not true for plastics. Also, money is a concern because plastics is a business, and it won't be recycled unless companies buy recycled plastic material to use for their products. But the problem is that recently, in 2019, new virgin plastic became cheaper than recycled plastic. So there was no incentive for companies to use even recycled plastic, making demand decrease significantly. And the price of virgin materials is linked to the price of oil because, of course, plastic comes from fossil fuels. So when the oil prices go down, so does the cost of new plastics. And the prices are really distorted. Obviously, they don't account for the environmental impact. But the cost of recycling plastic, on the other hand, has been increasing. And this is really problematic because it doesn't suggest that there's a future for recycling for us that's going to be able to really help our problem. The fourth reason that recycling is a problem is that there are so many different kinds of plastics and they cannot be recycled together. And often they need to be cleaned, sorted, and there's not usually facilities that can do this. In many countries in the world, only plastics number 1 and 2 can be legitimately labeled as recyclable because in most places, the facilities cannot recycle other numbers of plastics. And numbers 1 and 2 are usually beverage bottles and liquid bottles that contain liquids like shampoos or milk or laundry detergent. In Malaysia, we have an issue with the unknown. Actually, in many countries, this is a problem, not just Malaysia, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Malaysia here and also the US from my experience. But we aren't told what's actually recyclable. And we often see recycling containers that say that everything is collectible and recyclable, but the reality is that the facilities are not able to recycle a lot of the plastic material that is being thrown into the plastic bins, the recycling bins. And in 2021 in Malaysia, types 1, 2, and 5 were the most commonly recycled plastics, but I found that there's no comprehensive list of the types of plastics that are recycled in Malaysia. So it's actually really hard to know whether plastics are being recycled near you and which plastics are recyclable near you in the facility that's collecting your recycling. And just as an example, in the chart on the right, this one is in the US, but Greenpeace did a study to look at the acceptance rate of 4 common types of plastics in the US and found that they were very rarely able to be recycled. So things like plastic cups, plastic bags, plastic cutlery, and plates are accepted only between 1% and 11% of the time, which is not enough to be able to call those things recyclable. Also, we may not know it, but when plastic is contaminated with food, it can't be recycled, so it has to be clean. Otherwise, it contaminates the entire recycling batch, and in many cases, that means that the entire batch has to be thrown in the trash because it's often not economical to sort and clean all of the plastic. There's also a lot of types of packaging that we think and hope are recyclable, but they really aren't. Things like sachets, plastics that are covered with shrink sleeves, plastic that are mixed with other materials like our drink containers that are called Tetra Paks that look like paper on the outside, but it's lined with plastic and aluminum. Those aren't typically recyclable. They usually require special facilities because they have to be separated and it's not easy. And of course, food packaging bags are typically not recyclable. But people don't really know this because it's very hard to find out what's recyclable in your area, and the education on this is also not there. And the 6th reason that this plastic recycling is a problem is that there are inadequate facilities to manage the quantity of waste that we have. It's been really hard. It's really hard to find information in Malaysia on the actual recycling practices. But there was one report that claims that in Malaysia, it might only be possible to recycle 16% of domestic and imported waste, which is, of course, not remotely enough. And it makes us wonder, where is the rest of this recycling going, or where is the rest of our plastic waste going? And that's the problem, I think, is that it often ends up in our environment. And the other thing that's really interesting to note is there's a lot of discussion of the global plastic waste trade. And the reason why I think Malaysia likes to continue importing plastic waste from other countries is because it's easier for them to recycle. It often comes cleaner, sorted, and it's easier to process. And this means that it's preferred over domestic plastic waste in Malaysia. And so often the domestic household plastic in Malaysia is not being recycled because it's often contaminated, mixed with trash, and it's more difficult to sort. And the final reason that I want to put on here is that even though this is not always a problem of individuals, we are addicted to convenience, and we throw recyclable things into the trash. We contaminate our recycling with non-recyclable materials. We buy things that are not recyclable. Often we don't even know it, which is not necessarily our fault, but we buy a lot of things. And people sometimes actually throw away reusable materials instead of cleaning or reusing them because it's quicker. So we have this culture of being as fast as possible and making things as easy as possible that has really caused a lot of damage to the environment because we are not thinking of the impact of the products we consume. And so the conclusion here is that there's really no safe, feasible way to manage plastic. So we need to stop producing it, and we need to stop buying new plastic items. All right, just to quickly go through my last couple slides on solutions to leave you not too demoralized. I just want to highlight that, this is a systemic problem that is not just the responsibility of one group or one stakeholder. We need the government, businesses, and individuals to all be doing something about the climate crisis and the pollution crisis. We need people to be voting for politicians that care about climate change. We need much better policies. We also need businesses to stop lying about their practices. So we call this greenwashing, when they promote themselves as sustainable as a marketing tactic, but they're not actually doing meaningful change to become more environmentally conscious and safe. And we also, as individuals, we need to think about our consumption habits, and are we really reusing our products? Are we, buying new things that we don't need? It's something we have to be willing to bring our own water bottles and our own containers if we want refill and reuse systems to work. So just to give some ideas about what individuals can do, and also link to what my experience has been, I think shopping zero waste, especially saying no to plastic, especially when you're eating food and drinks. Do not eat out of plastic because it increases your risk of ingesting microplastics. Buying local, eating more plant-based foods, growing your own food, composting, repairing, reusing, and repurposing, and thinking about whether we need what we're buying. We have this culture where we just want to buy new things because it's nice and it gives us a short-term good feeling, but it's really harming the environment. So I just wanted to share, finally, my final slide is just with some inspiration to show. I know Karpeng mentioned that I practice zero waste, and I wanted to show a little bit how I do that. So you can see here that this is how I buy products, and I store them in primarily glass jars and Tupperware. And I go to zero waste bulk stores, which exist in KL, in Malaysia, and in most countries, most big cities. There are options, and we just don't really hear about them, but you can find places where you can reduce your consumption of plastics and processed food and harmful food. So that's all, and I will close here and open for any questions if there are some. I'm not sure if there's time though. Over to you, Karpeng.
Thank you, Margo, for that very, very insightful and interesting sharing with so many numbers to back up, what you talk about. And it is sad that, we are doing so many things without us even knowing that we are actually harming the environment indirectly, right? Many of us will not go out and kill the fish or destroy the coral, but indirectly, when you consume fish, you are actually, supporting that. So, like your last solution says, is really for us individually to be much more aware of, how we consume, and therefore plant-based perhaps is the way to go in reducing our carbon footprint. So instead of just counting calories, we should now start to count our carbon footprint like you do every week, measuring, how much waste that you throw away, that sort of thing. And I was a plantation analyst in my previous life, and it is sad to see that RSPO hasn't really worked. Yeah, that is another topic, for another day. But plastic pandemic is really scary. In one of the companies that I'm sitting on the board, we are now doing PET bottles recycling into food grade containers. So it is, something that is at least of the same grade, and it's not a lower grade. And hopefully that will, help in a small way. And I think, learning from what you've just presented is that we actually hold the power to change the world, like what the Greenpeace say, right? By making right choices in our own daily living. And I like to share this one caption that I read on the Greenpeace website with everyone. If you have not already, searched the website, is that imagine a world where forests flourish and oceans are full of light, where energy is as clean as a mountain stream, where everyone has security, dignity, and joy. We can't build this future alone, but we can build it together. So this is really something that we must do. And it makes me think of, right now we have many corporates all over the world pledging net zero by 2050. That is very far out. Do we have that long time to get to, the 1.5, boundary of temperature rise? I've learned that we only have 6+ years. So if every one of us practice, we may be able to stretch that timeline. But again, there are 8 billion of us in this world. So just the corporates doing it is not going to help. So it requires each and every one of us to practice, like what you're doing. So with that, if you have time, I'd like to open, Q&A to the floor. Yes, any questions from the floor? This is a really good chance to ask Margo.
Maybe I could start by saying I saw one comment in the chat that asked if all thin plastics are unrecyclable. And I think it really depends, but in most cases, they are not recyclable. And in fact, bags, like flexible plastic, such as plastic bags, often can cause a lot more harm if it's thrown into the recycling, because it can get caught in the machinery and jam the recycling process in facilities that are not equipped to recycle plastic bags. So it's not something that we would say is commonly recyclable, but people don't really know that. And I see a lot of plastic bags thrown into the recycling, and I wonder what happens, because I don't think it's easy to recycle that.
Yeah, Margo, I do actually have a question. Oh, yeah, Brother Jeffrey, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I just want to ask, how much support does our Malaysian government give to Greenpeace in Malaysia? I'm just curious.
Good question. I guess by support, it depends what you mean by support. We of course don't accept any financial support from governments. So we don't receive any support that way, but we do try to engage with the governments to really try to share information and push them to develop more sustainable policies. So we are always working, especially to develop relationship with the Minister of Environment, for example, but really trying to help support governments to learn more and ask the right questions and share more information. And in Malaysia, the government has for example, it has a roadmap to single-use plastic reduction, but it's it needs to be a lot stronger. Right now, there's no actual commitments that it has said it must follow through with. The entire roadmap, it says, can be amended at any time at government discretion. So it's not strong enough. And the government is also, another thing that's really important to consider is what we call false solutions, which are things that are promoted as more sustainable than our standard practices, but are not actual solutions. And that would be things like waste to energy, which is essentially incineration of plastic waste. And this is something a lot of governments are talking about as a proposed solution to manage the waste crisis. But waste to energy, like I mentioned, when you burn plastics, it produces poisonous gases and toxic ash, and that's not safe. So it's really not going to solve our problem, because even if we burn every plastic, even if it were safe, it still means we're producing new plastic. And the cycle of producing new plastic is destroying the environment too. So that's one of the solutions that we are really trying to push governments to call for real solutions, not say that recycling is going to work, because we know that it's not going to fix. I mean, I'm not saying don't recycle, but recycling is not enough, and we need governments to start recognizing that, and we need them to start promoting actual solutions, which are mainly reuse and refill systems, which is something that isn't foreign. We used to have those systems, especially in Malaysia. people used to refill their containers, and it wasn't until global companies came in and really started pushing this consumerism and quick buy new small packets of things that made people, communities forget that we have sustainable ways that we used to live with.
Yeah. I guess the recycling, every government will support that. Is the palm oil portion, where palm oil is a big part of our Malaysian GDP, and Greenpeace is not in favor of palm oil. That's where I felt,
Maybe just to clarify, it's not that we aren't in favor of palm oil, and we do recognize the importance of it in the economy in Malaysia,
Yeah.
but we have to stop producing unsustainable palm oil. And our goal is to hold the companies accountable for not checking their supply chains. So it's not saying we want to eliminate palm oil. We realize that it's a way of living for many people, and there are palm oil plantations that are not burning, but there's not enough. And we really need more enforcement, more regulation, and we need companies to be really being more transparent and checking their supply chains, because they're greenwashing. They're saying it's sustainable when it's not, and that's the problem.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I think, as far as palm oil is concerned, if it is done sustainably, it's actually the best oil, because once you plant an oil palm, it will continue to produce for 28 years. And that's what makes it so exciting, and why it is the cheapest oil in the world, because it's not like, an annual crop where you have to clear cut, so you talk about, soya, it has to be, clear cut, and then you replant it again. But like I said, that is a story for another time.
Yeah.
But what is really important, from your sharing today, is that to have changes, it really has got to start from us, because we are the consumers. Not only how much we consume, but we can also demand changes from our suppliers, from the wholesalers, and even the government. So, that's one question that I like to ask you, is that while, we have lots of blueprints in this country, but, is it implemented? Is it well implemented? Take, for example, recycling. I think, all of us would like, to separate all our waste, but is the government, the local authority supporting it? With proper, waste collection, let's say, your household's waste, the recyclables and non-recyclables, are they coming to collect it? Do we actually have that sort of infrastructure? And this is one area that, I would really like, Greenpeace to look into that, and how, you could actually, encourage the government to have this going. And then the other area is what we actually don't see as consumers. We buy a product, but the industrial waste that product generates, where do they all go? Given that, like what you say, a lot of corporates are very, profit oriented. This waste recycling and this waste disposal, are they being handled properly? Because the reason why I say that is because river pollution has happened so often in Malaysia. So who are the culprits, right? So these are perhaps areas that Greenpeace can actually help us, to monitor and get the government to better regulate, the manufacturers themselves. Do they know when they hand over the waste to the recyclers? Are they proper? Are they licensed to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think there's a lot of challenges and issues with enforcement of regulations that already exist. And even those regulations aren't strong enough. And the reality is, I think the problem starts at the source, which is, the fact is the governments subsidize oil and gas, and the prices for products that are really harming the environment are very cheap. And that means that people choose those products over others. And so from the beginning, we are influencing the price to make plastic. It doesn't include the environmental cost, of course. So it's a lot of people, a lot of vendors started using plastic because it was cheaper and lighter than other materials. But that's because it's been made cheap, and government is part of that because it supports the industry and it doesn't regulate it. Or there should, I mean, I personally think there should be a tax on products that aren't able to be managed in the environment after they are thrown away. And from my personal side, I also think, you know, it's been a real challenge to figure out what's recyclable and what's happening to the things that we try to separate and put in the recycling. And that's also one of the reasons why I really try to eliminate all use of plastic, because I know I can't depend on where it's going. So as a starting point, and maybe this is to help other people if they want to start, look at the products available in the supermarket. If you have a plastic bottle and a can option with the same product, choose the can, because the can is much more likely to be recycled than the plastic. And it's also typically can be better for your health because there's so many issues with plastics, although some cans are lined with plastic. But in terms of recycling, yeah, it's something that we're really trying to work on at Greenpeace, and of course encourage governments to be more transparent and to figure out, because often the governments don't even know what's happening. They themselves have trouble getting the information because they haven't really prioritized the enforcement or the monitoring of this waste management systems. And there's just not enough facilities too that are regulated. There's lots of illegal waste facilities and dumping that happens, and it's really hard to know where and when. And yeah, but it's something that we are really trying to work on at Greenpeace too.
Thank you so much. I have got a question here from Encik Faisal Mansur. He asks, is there a game plan to include this knowledge as a life skill for sustainability in school or our education system?
It's a really good question, and something I wish. I think, yeah, I've often had a dream of founding an NGO that could educate children in schools on this, starting from a young age, because most people care about it, but they just were never told. And I myself, I remember when I started learning more about these things, I was shocked, and I couldn't believe that as a child, we grew up thinking that we could just throw things away, and there was such thing as a way, and we didn't question it. So I fully support this idea, and I think there's a lot of life skills, including food skills. Learning to grow and cook our own food is something we should be teaching children in school. We are so disconnected from our natural world, and many people are so removed from the source of their food. They have no idea where it comes from, and it's really unnatural. And I think it's something that needs to start in education. So I support that, but I as far as I know, I haven't seen a lot of support from governments because I think that would be the place where it needs to also be pushed to make an impact in school systems.
Yeah, I on this point, I would like to highlight that in Tzu Chi school, we have got a Tzu Chi International School in Bukit Jalil, and it's a wholly vegetarian school. We only serve vegetarian food, and kids are taught about recycling from a very, very young age, from preschool onwards, and they are taught about environmental protection. And so, and we, Master always believe that, holistic education is very, very important to develop habits from a young age. So that becomes, their character. And if you teach them plastic is bad and give them the reason why plastic is bad, it will be embedded in their mind. And that is what they will grow up rejecting plastic. So this is what we are doing in Tzu Chi International School. And we ourselves are trying to practice that. So in 3 months or so, there is something, but we are very small. And we need the entire, government to push through an education system that is much more environmental centric than just acquiring knowledge. Yeah, knowledge without virtues, it's very scary.
That's really exciting to hear. Thanks for sharing, because also I think one of the things we recognize at Greenpeace is even if it seems like it's not a big, even if it seems like it's just one school, that is an example. It's a model of something that we could be doing. And I think that's a really important place to start, is showing what's possible. So it's really inspiring to hear that. And I just saw in the chat, there was another question about biodegradable containers and whether they are a better choice, which is a really good question. And this one is tricky because biodegradable containers, in many cases, the label of biodegradable or even compostable, especially when it comes to plastic, is very misleading, because sometimes those materials require, well, in most cases, they require very specific special facilities to biodegrade. They wouldn't necessarily biodegrade in a landfill, which is a real problem because that's usually where they end up. And to make it even more confusing, if plastic is labeled biodegradable or compostable, it cannot be recycled, which is, people don't know, the labeling is often not very clear and they don't even think about it, and they throw that plastic into the recycling and that contaminates the recycling. So it's something that at Greenpeace we try to flag as often a false solution, because it's something that companies like to use to promote themselves as being sustainable, but they don't have the infrastructure to collect that material and make sure it biodegrades. And they're often, people are not educated about what is necessary for that material to biodegrade. And in addition to that, normally biodegradable plastics are made from plants, which comes from agriculture. So it's still not an ideal solution because it's requiring land to make plastic. So if we today switch to all biodegradable plastics from agriculture, we would require a massive amount of land for that, and that wouldn't be sustainable either. So that's why we really try to push for what we say are real solutions, which is refilling and reusing our own containers.
Yeah, thank you. That is so true. And this is also something that I learned about, the non-woven shopping bags, the very bright green and pink and the red shopping bags. Those they break down so easily into powder form, and it goes into our waterways, becomes microplastic. So those are things that we also have to reject. People thinking that they are reusable is better than the plastic bags, but in reality, they could be just as more, if not, equally, if not more dangerous than just using plastic bags. So it's a lot of consumer information and education that we need to help our people to be much more knowledgeable of what to say no to, right, in our everyday living. So it's been really great. We have gone over time, but I think no one is complaining. And perhaps we could have more of these kind of sharing by you in future. And if that's no other question, I would like to close up the session for today. And thank you so very much, Margo, for sharing your insight, and it's been real learning for everyone online as well as those who have joined us on YouTube. So with that, we'd like to extend our greatest thank you to you. Yeah, and back to you, Sister Su Ching.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to see other people that are interested.
Thank you so much. Sister Su Ching, would you like to close the session? Okay, with that, perhaps, Sister Effie, are you there? You want to close the session?
Yeah, thank you very much to Sister Margo and Sister Kathleen for hosting, and very informative today. Thank you. We look forward to another wonderful and insightful sharing again from Sister Margo in the future. Very interesting, really, we learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, perhaps before we go, let's take a picture. Yeah, Sister YY, could you help us with that? Thank you.
Yeah, Sister Cupping. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay.
And with that, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everyone,
much,
for
Sis
joining
Margo.
us.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Really
you. Bye-bye.
wonderful sharing.
Bye-bye.
Very insightful. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Sister Cupping. Wonderful hosting.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.